Bracket settings can be super confusing if you're just getting into real estate photography, so let's go over what they are, how we use them, and the different scenes that I have set up on my camera to speed you up in your workflow and get you shooting better photos fast. So the first thing to understanding what brackets are and how to use them is defining what a middle of the road exposure is and what a stop of light is. So for me, I like to explain things in a way that works with my brain, and the easiest way to understand that is that a middle of the road exposure, or an MTR exposure, is going to be any subject or any surface that we have picked that we want to be neutral on our light meter, dead center in it. That's going to give us a middle of the road exposure, or a neutral exposure. A stop is going to be one stop on that light meter brighter on the exposure, or one stop darker on that light meter. Two stops is going to obviously be 2, 3, and so on and so forth. Now, when you get to bracketing, you can set it up to have 3, 5, 7, and 9 stops, and sometimes even more if you want to set up something custom. For me, and for real estate photography, I use 5 frames, 2 stops apart. That is going to be your standard that you will find with almost every single editor and almost every single real estate professional out there. Now, the reason that we use 5 frames, 2 stops apart is because usually when you have 1 stop apart, you don't capture enough dynamic range from the inside of a house. Homes tend to be very dark on the inside, very bright on the outside, and have extremely high contrast. So the best way to capture all of that, especially with our modern sensors, is to give 2 stops of light between each one of those set brackets. And those set brackets need to be at least 5 of them, because if you do 3, you still don't capture the full dynamic range of it. Now, why don't we use 7 or 9? And the reason is because it's a lot of files. 5 balances the best number of files, and it's the easiest to manage on the back end for me, especially when you start mixing in some flambient photography and you have flash frames. Typically, a large room might have 2 to 3 flash frames to completely light it up and to get it out of the windows. So when you start adding in 7 and 9, you get so many files that it gets really complicated, and you have so many different angles that it's hard to delineate what angles go with what flash frames, and it just costs more time on the end of it and more time in post and just organizing files. So if you're going to want to speed up your photography, you're going to want to set up different scenes on your camera. Now, every manufacturer is different, but they do have different user scenes, user settings. Sometimes they are called custom settings. On Nikons, it's going to be different between the Z cameras. So the Z6 and the Z7 are going to have user settings. The Z8 and the Z9 are going to have scenes that are A, B, C, and D. We're going to be setting up 3 different ones so that we can roll between all of them to flow between interiors, exteriors, and flash. So the first scene that I always set up is my interior scene. My interior scene is going to be at 1/125th of a second on shutter speed, ISO 400, and an aperture of f8, set to those 5 brackets, 2 stops apart, with a 2-second self timer. The next scene that I set up is generally either manual mode or a scene right next to it, so I can just turn that dial or press the button to move quickly between it for flash. My flash scene is going to be set up with 1/200th of a second shutter speed, an ISO of 200, and an aperture of f8, again with a 2-second timer, but no bracket settings. All right, my exteriors are going to be set up to have a 1/500th of a second shutter speed, an ISO of 200, and an aperture of f8. We're going to have brackets set to 5, 2 stops apart, but this time we're going to be on a continuous high-speed shooting. That way we can just shoot off as many as we can. Also, we're going to be hand-holding it, so the higher speed you have, the less chance of movement. If you want to use a tripod, you can. I find it to be quite annoying, and it just gets in the way, especially with how uneven the land can be. A monopod is a much better option on that, but if you can use a high speed and have a really high speed camera like the Z8 here with 20 frames a second, it's going to go a long way to help you not have a lot of movement between the frames, but still capture enough data that if you need to merge them or you need to blend them, you're going to be able to capture all that dynamic range between the bright daylight and the dark shadows that a lot of those patios and covers can have on them. And that's really going to be it. It's going to make it easy for you to switch between scenes. You're now going to know that you're going to have about 5 frames for every exterior angle that you took, and anywhere from 6 to 7 frames for any interior angles that you took. You can then go into Lightroom, auto sort them by capture time, and then you can auto stack them by having a certain amount of seconds between each of the frames that you took, and it will automatically stack them together so you can organize them, send them off to your editor, hand blend them yourself, and speed up your workflow so that you can capture more and make more money.